Yeah.
All right, so this will be 200, and then we'll hit the 225, 240s. Right. All right, begins with me. No, begins with you.
Until 2004, did the income generated from these various sources provide sufficient monies to pay for the expenses of 2004?
They did up until the summer of '04, and then the payments that this man was making who bought the property went up to $1,000 or $1,100, something like that. You would have a record of all that in there. Before that, money had to be transferred from the maximizer to her checking.
Well, I'm not sure I have gotten an answer to my question. Did the income provide sufficient funds to meet the expenses for '04?
No, not until the summer of '04. She only got one or two of the bigger payments before he paid everything off.
In 2003, did the income meet expenses?
No,
What was the deficit amount that she was running? How much more in expenses did she have than income?
it couldn't be determined. I don't know. It would be different every month.
I'm talking now for a year. Did you have some sort of feeling as to how much her assets were being depleted to maintain her lifestyle, to keep her in the manner that she has been accustomed?
I couldn't determine that, not without going over all the books, and I just don't know. Her small amount of Social Security and the little amounts from the San Diego stock she had were not adequate for running the house or paying a lot of the expenses. She had a lot of expenses with her Minnesota property also.
On your book number 5 of the Cash Maximizer account, entry 177, payable to cash, what is the amount of cash that was withdrawn?
$1,200.
But what was the purpose? What was that cash used for?
12/20/04. I'm sure some of it would have been for Christmas presents.
What would the rest of it have been for?
I might have had some cash out of it, and she probably had some for herself.
How much cash would you have received?
Maybe 100 to 200, somewhere in there.
Would that be for Christmas presents?
No, she didn't give me separate money for Christmas gifts. She gave me the same as she gave everybody else.
Do you recall what she gave you for Christmas presents in that year?
She was in the hospital then. I did all of her shopping. I also had to buy a lot of things that she needed up at the convalescent hospital, so that was included, would be included in that.
Did you prepare her meals for her when she was at the convalescent hospital?
I helped her eat every night. I was up there 2 hours.
Would you take meals up there?
No, they had food up there. Her doctor ordered a special diet for her without a lot of salt and so forth. She ate better if I was there to help her eat, so I was there every night.
Let's go to the time when you went to Mr. Clark's office. Did you tell him that you wanted him to represent you?
I asked for advice on my situation and what I should do. He asked me to bring him a copy of the will when he got back from a trip that he was going on.
Did you know, other than from what Don Biggie had said to you, that Mr. Clark had represented your father?
Yes, I knew he had been his lawyer previously, years before.
Did you say to Mr. Clark that you wanted to consult with him regarding your mother's affairs?
Regarding my situation in correlation with her affairs and the family affairs.
After your mother died, did you meet with Mr. Clark?
Yes.
And did you meet with him by yourself, or were you with other members?
I came in the Wednesday before my mother passed away, which would have been probably the 5th of June, and I brought him the will and he looked it over, and then we had a conference with the doctor that Thursday, and then I called Mr. Clark, and I had asked him at that point if he would be the executor, having been my dad's attorney, the family attorney for a long time. I thought that he would be the one knowing more about things connected with this estate. My sister and brother had told me to try and find an attorney, and I had asked them about what they thought about Mr. Clark, and they said, well, what do you think of him? And I told them that he was our dad's attorney and that he would be the most likely one probably to take over things, and they agreed. So
you went to him after your mother died to ask him if he would be the executor?
after I took him the will and we went over it,
And you wanted him to be made executor?
I asked him if he would be.
What did he say?
He was a little hesitant at first, but he did agree afterwards. I talked to After I talked to him, I guess, about all the problems in the family, he knew I needed somebody to be the executor.
So he agreed to be the executor?
Yes. And then on Thursday, we had a conference with the doctor. We were told that my mother would probably not, or would pass away sometime within a week. So I called Mr. Clark right away and made an appointment for all of us to see him that Friday, the day before she died.
And did you?
Yes.
And what transpired at that meeting?
We talked about the Minnesota property and the property here, well, anything connected with the things in the will. He looked over the will and he was reading things out of the will and who was to be left this, that, and just anything you would discuss concerning the estate.
And your sister Diane was present?
Yeah.
Were you and your sister on good terms at the end of that meeting?
We were then. We had just become friends again after 2 weeks before my mother died.
But at the end of the meeting with Mr. Clark, had she made any statements to you about she didn't want you coming to her house?
Not then.
Did she make that statement ever to you?
In July in his office, and then she made it many times before my mother passed away, about 4 years before she was treating me pretty shabbily, which was upsetting my mother.
Did you ever pay any of your monies to Mr. Clark? Did you ever write him a check for legal services or give him any cash or anything of that nature?
No.
Did he ever give you a bill?
No.
Did you ever ask him, why you hadn't received a bill or something if you consulted him?
I don't remember. I probably did at the time. I don't remember now.
After Mr. Clark agreed to act as executor and file the necessary papers with the court, did you feel that Mr. Clark was representing you as an attorney?
He had given me advice and counsel on all the things I wanted to know about. All right, now we'll scoot on up to the 225. Remember Savings and Loan and Bank of America? They're gonna be.
Okay.
All right, so we just thought out of the chute we'd wake you up at 200. Better? All right, now 225.
And stop, there's a stopping button.
No.
You tell me.
Okay,
Okay. All right, ready?
ready.
Where was that? Did you have an account with a savings and loan?
Yes, in Downey.
Did you bring any documentation of that with you?
No, I don't have any records of that. I think that was thrown out a long time ago.
How much money did you have at the time?
5,000. That was accumulated over probably 7 or 8 years.
And was this account at the Bank of America?
No.
What bank was that account at?
It was at Bank of America in Anaheim, but that bank was destroyed long ago. They tore it down to redevelop.
How do you spell the name of Marquette?
Marquette.
At what branch was this account?
That one was at 6th and Marquette.
And was the name of Marquette Bank?
Uh-huh.
And was your savings account in the name of Mary Stans?
Uh-huh.
When did you close this account?
Well, it would be close to the end of January in '03, just before I came home.
How long had you had an account there?
For probably 6 or 7 years, however long it took me to accumulate that amount. I think about 6 or 7 years.
And was it a checking account or a savings account?
Just a savings.
Did you earn interest on it?
Some interest.
Do you recall what the interest rate was?
Gosh, it was small then. Whatever it was a very small amount.
Did you ever receive any forms from the bank in terms of what interest was earned for that year?
Yes.
Did you report that income on your tax returns?
Yes, when I made my taxes out.
And did you ever file any type of return that would have notified the Internal Revenue Service that you were no longer filing returns?
I don't remember ever filing a return like that because the following year I was on my mother. I was living at home then.
Do you know if your mother took you as a dependent on her 1982 return?
1982 return would have been filed in 1983. Is that the one?
The return prepared for the annual year of 1982.
That would have been prepared in 83, right?
It may have been, assuming that it were prepared.
Let's see, I was home in the fall and the winter of 81 and 2, so she probably did take me as a dependent that year.
Do you know if she took you?
Well, Well, won't it be in the records there?
I'm asking you if you know.
I assume she did. I did not go to the income tax man with her at that time.
Did she ever tell you that she was taking you as a dependent when you were living in Minnesota?
Not when I was living in Minnesota, no.
And did you file an income tax return for 1982?
No, I was at home that fall and winter. I went back to California the summer of '82 with her and then went back to work that fall.
Back to work in California?
Uh-huh.
For the year 1982, did you file your own tax return?
No.
Did you file a tax return for 1981?
Yes, that would have been filed in Minnesota.
Did you file a federal return?
State and federal, as far as I can remember. See, a lot of those records were the things that were taken in the burglary, so I have nothing to go by on that.
Do you know if your mother took you as a dependent on her 1981 return?
Let me think a minute now. I came home in September of 1980. I was at home 80 and 81. So she would have had to take me. I mean, I wouldn't be working in Minnesota at that time.
Were you in California in 1979?
Yes, I was.
Full time?
Yes.
Well, he's all over, huh?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we'll repeat that one. We might have a little trouble.
Yes.
All right. That was a little over 3 minutes at 225. We'll do a little more 225. So it begins with me, right? Oh, no. All right. We'll start right there.
Do you know if your mother took you as a dependent on her 1979 income tax return?
I'm sure she didn't.
You are sure she didn't?
I filed my own income tax at that time.
Have you got copies of your tax returns?
They were taken in the burglary in 1981.
And did you ever keep copies of tax returns in safe deposit boxes?
No, I did not. I was commuting so much and moving back and forth, so much that I had all of these records in the tote bag that was taken.
Did you ever discuss with your mother her tax returns in 1979 to 80?
No.
Did you ever talk with her accountant?
No.
When did you start talking with her accountants regarding tax returns?
When Mr. Biggie took over, and that was probably 4 or 5 years before my mother died, in 84 and 83, I was talking to him. She was talking to him before that.
Did you have an accountant prepare your tax returns when you were in California?
No, mine were very uncomplicated, so I could do them myself.
Now, what was your address for tax purposes for 1981?
I was in Pasadena. I came home the fall of 1980, and I was there through 80 and the first part of 82.
So the returns that you would file...
I didn't have any of those years. I filed 80 returns in 1981.
And that's the last return you filed was 1980?
Until I went back to California in 82 to work again.
Did you file returns there?
Yes, for that year, 82, the part of 82 that I worked.
And did you use an address for Pasadena, or did you use a California address?
I was getting a refund. I always had a refund, and I gave in fact, many times I gave the refund address as Pasadena because I knew I'd be coming home at the time the check would be coming. I didn't want it to be lost where I was staying there.
Did you file returns with the state of California?
Yes.
And when was the last return that you filed with them?
1983.
And what was the address for purposes of that return tax address?
The Roxbury address.
And did you ever return or receive any notices from the state after 1983 why a further return hadn't been filed?
No, never.
Did you ever receive any notices from the state of California?
Never.
Did you ever receive any notices from the Internal Revenue Service?
Never. I got my refund checks and that was the end of it. When I came home the end of January, I thought I was going to be home for just only maybe 2 years, and it ended up being a lot longer.
In paragraph 4 of your petition, you indicated that Mr. Clark instructed you to deliver proceeds of all accounts to him as personal representative.
Right.
Where were you when he instructed you that?
In his office.
Was anyone else present?
No.
After your mother's death, did you attempt to withdraw funds from any of her accounts at Bank of America?
That's regarding the $5,000 I was talking to you about earlier.
I'm asking you, did you attempt to withdraw any funds from Bank of America?
I did withdraw funds on Mr. Clark's advice.
Did you ever have any problems with the bank in terms of withdrawing funds?
No.
Did you ever make a request of them to issue a check to you, and did they ever refuse?
No, the only check that was issued, the closing of the accounts.
Mr. Lucas is your current attorney, correct?
Yes.
Have you had counsel before?
No, not before Mr. Clark.
So Mr. Lucas was the attorney that you consulted with after you decided that Mr. Clark should no longer be?
No.
And did you return Mr. Berg?
Let's do this last page up.